Hi, this is Matt Adcock. I'm reading from my book Complete Darkness. This is the chapter Bad Karma Infraction Kicks In. Cleric 20 liked girls. There were simply no two ways about it. Sure, he could admire the physique of a well-ripped guy, or the obvious good looks of men like the famous elderly actor Brad Pitt III, but he just wasn't able to find anything truly sensual in their bodies. Females, however, that was something else entirely. They were a constant fascination to him, and a passion he shared with his best friends and sometimes wingmen, Sauce and Brooks. There were many and various tales, some taller than others, that the friends used to share and reminisce over about their exploits and exploitation of the fairer sex. It was little wonder then that the L2 Int Perfect Woman project had been one that Cleric 20 had been an avid follower of from its announcement. Cleric 20 actually volunteered to take part in the advanced beta isometric passion testing, where thousands of variously aged men from across the social spectrum had allowed their fantasy female image to be downloaded directly from their subconscious and their head chips, and fed into the input variables of the INT project. Cleric's list of past lovers was long and painful for him to think about. Most had been meaningless things, and few had tugged on his deeper affections. A couple have actually won his heart. His true love was the one he could do nothing about. From the moment he saw her, he knew she was the one. Her name was JJ, and he'd loved her in a way that some mortals never get to experience. The day he lost her almost killed him. It certainly left some deep scars that didn't expect those wounds to heal. INT, which stood for the inaugural neurological testament, was to be the ultimate male fantasy figure. The combination of all aspects of mankind perceived to make up what a truly perfect woman was. Major developments in hot demi-cloning had allowed genetic science to a new realm of control over every possible variation and makeup of a genetic code. The accumulation of this achievement was to allow the first genetically designed Uber babe to be made living and breathing reality. So, INT was created, and she was seen by the entire male scientific team behind the project and pronounced to be perfect. The fast growth of such a lab-created human was highly controversial, especially when it appeared that the result was going to be a woman of unimaginable sexiness whose only moral code had been uploaded by the dodgy dark male fantasies of men who'd signed up for the project. Basically, a self-selecting bunch of perverts, sex addicts, and lonely saddos, dreaming of one day actually speaking with or having any sort of physical contact with a girl. The media wrote many headlines around the theme of the INT team, creating themselves a girlfriend because it was the only way they were ever going to get one. INT then, a woman designed by men, for men, a dream made flesh, and as much of the promotional work of the project alluded to, we had created a second Eve. This bold quasi-religious statement was surprisingly endorsed by the official Global World Church, or GWC, which was now the only accepted religion on the planet. It was a compromise and mix of creeds and belief systems across all the major world faiths. After the debacle and ongoing fortunate repercussions of the faith and God bots, the metal evangelists who had brought most of the religious movements on the planet to their knees, with truly biblical bloodshed beyond anything that had been perpetrated in the name of religion up until that point. L2's governments were quick to enforce unification, backed up by serious military firepower, which was recorded as the final crusade for religious tolerance and achievable spiritual peace. The GWC was the result. It was the enforcement of this spectacularly hard-nosed persecution policy of all religious groups, and the unflinching conform or die mandate used by the battle mages that really stood out. It pleased Razour no end that his own occult-empowered military enforcers were ironically entrusted with the task of massacring believers of any and all religions which did not pledge their souls to the new One Creed, Many Gods manifesto of the GWC. The advertising line, which was beamed into the air in mile-high letters above the GWC HQ church, said, "Everyone believes the same thing now, so it must be right." Of course, the long dark precedent for military use of spiritual or occult forces is no secret. The attempted channeling of the very forces of darkness to fight alongside and or terrorise an army into greater victories, no matter what the cost, had been attempted with various results. Ancient records traced bloodlines of demonic or spiritual warrior assistants through the leaderships of the Nazis, the Romans, where we get a god of war Mars and the word martial taken from, back to the earliest men, looking to their shaman for a blessing before massacring a neighbouring tribe they disagree with. And in the 2100s, the military of L2 developed the perfect concept of a battle mage. These are wizards to all intents and purposes that could directly influence and participate in the course of battles. Sold to the government funding committee under the concept of making warfare more tactical and yet retaining some humanity, and as a potentially cheaper alternative to the more technologically advanced and costly mech battalions and assault droids. Now the two main branches of the L2 controlled armed forces had the Machine Corps, a mixture of human soldiers piloting exoskeletons, backed up with considerable and varied number of robotically engineered ground troops, working alongside a significant number of AI-minded droids of every description. The other branch of the L2 military became known as the Enhanced Ability Enforcement Corps, or the EAC, more commonly known as their street name, IF, which stood for Imaginary Friends. The power struggle between these two factions had been a growing source of consternation for generals from the beginning, and when the IF passed the internal edict to remove any and all AIs and robots from their ranks and operate a systematic standpoint of non-compliance or cooperation with any metal corruption, it was nothing short than tantamount to directly picking a fight with their robotically interwoven brethren. Cleric 20 kept the fact that he had IF basic training quiet. He had been selected for it because he has uncanny hand-eye coordination, which the Dark Scouts had deemed as being potentially spirit-guided. That was complete bollocks, of course. Cleric 20's skills were simply a result of many months of his life playing various hybrid games machines, including the all-conquering Sony 2 Play product, which had become the planet-wide console of choice, repeating and building on the cycle of Sony's competitor-crushing record in the historical records of PlayStation and the like. Cleric 20 did his time in the IF, a year to be precise, but his heart wasn't in it, and despite his killer coordination and immediate skill with weapons, he was the first to point out that he didn't have any otherworldly powers on which to call upon. To Cleric, there was something just not quite right about the powers exhibited by battle mages, and now he had openly allowed a robot into his house. None of the IF he had trained with would even speak to him. But Gix was worth it. Cleric 20 couldn't imagine not having his metallic friend around now. He'd saved his ass on so many occasions, more than he cared to remember, although Gix did keep a running count, and he would sometimes use it to try and bargain with his master. Cleric 20 figured he either had it or he didn't, and maging was something that it was virtually impossible to learn from scratch. It seemed that unless you were possessed by some dark spirit or other, your chances of becoming a battle mage were slim, even when the training began very young. It seemed incredible that something as unscientific as magic and the most sophisticated high-tech weaponry could ever form a bond for effective warfare. But that was indeed the outcome, and battle mages were first unleashed and used in live combat in late 2052. Pyrius Swerge was recorded as being the first to actually see active duty, and he was used in the Greater Manchester civil uprising of that year. Government forces were taken by surprise by the angry mob of more than 10,000 people, and they were angry because of being forcefully evicted from their homes for the inability to pay the new residency tax. The protesters somehow managed to break into and take over an arms depot, emerging with serious weaponry and the antagonistic will to use it. At first, the government forces were mown down as the mob attacked any authority personnel or vehicles, and the novelty of having heavy ordnance, such as heat-seeking null missiles, was just too much for the crowd to hold back. The mob operated a shoot-on-sight mentality, which fast became a major problem. When the initial law enforcement forces had been wiped out, the crowds turned their weapons on the city's infrastructure. As the death toll rose catastrophically, parts of the city were fast becoming garrisoned by this new civil army. A hastily signed authorization from the L2 president saw the highly trained Pyrius released from his secure holdings and let out into the field. There is little footage still available from that fateful day's actual confrontation. After their early victories, the crowds had grown complacent. They knew that even the heavy-handed government wouldn't use massive destruction weapons on one of its own cities, and given their relative success at combating the fast response Gov forces on the ground, they were busy fortifying their positions in the towers of the buildings of the southern edge of the city. The self-appointed coordinators of the civil army deemed that this was the most likely route for a Gov counterattack, because it stretched through a barren wilderness and had a 50-lane major highway. They were right, but they could not have factored the presence of Pyrius Before the mob even sighted the lumbering heavy battle tanks with low-orbit, insanely long-range artillery shell emplacements, they were suddenly and unnervingly taken out by an accurate volley of nerve-penalizing gas. As the government air support moved in, their missiles struck home with 100% accuracy. The battle was over in minutes. It is impossible to stand against an enemy that never misses. And morale on the side of the civil army dropped faster than their comrades. How was it possible that missiles could track through windows, make 90-degree corners at subsonic speeds, and don't detonate until literally in the faces of the designated targets? The summary execution of the deemed ringleaders was played across all media channels that evening. Details of the reason behind the highly effective counterattack by the Gulf forces were not made so public, but the shockwaves of having a live field test for the first battle mage were seismic, and the fast tracking of the Battle Mage Academy guaranteed Piraeus became a legend overnight within those circles whose security clearance knew what had actually happened that day. The Battle Mage Academy, this is a good bit. The Battle Mage Academy became known as the Top Magi, an occult battle training centre, based on the famous United States Naval Strike Fighter Tactics Instructional School, kind of crossed with Hogwarts. Sword soon rose to become the general of the first Battle Mage Brethren, and his abilities were only the beginning, as the study and practice of honing the arcane power became a priority between his unit. Commander Richardson's grandfather had been a pilot of one of the government air support units called in to monitor the Manchester civil uprising, and he had been amazed and aghast at how the Battle Mage Piraeus had seemed to direct the very shells themselves, even those with no AI assistance built in, so that they fell or hit exactly what needed. It troubled him to think of what ungodly powers this mage might wield, and this, at least indirectly, was very much carried through to the current Commander Richardson, who hated battle mages with a vengeance. As one of the top commanders in the MECH Corps, he was partly responsible for the ongoing bitter rivalry between the tech-heavy machines and the EIC magical brethren.